Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, and best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to learn how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. We have a special guest with us today, Kevin O'Shaughnessy, who's one of the executive directors and leader of the Digital and Agile Transformation Program at Alpha FMC, which is a consulting firm supporting asset managers, wealth managers, and insurance companies with a mix of strategy through to execution. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, Michael, and many thanks for inviting me to join us. So, yes, my name is Kevin O'Shaughnessy. As Michael said, I lead our digital and agile transformation practice here at Alpha FMC. I'm based out of the UK, but Alpha is a global firm by nature, so I tend to work with clients across Europe and the US, and obviously many of those asset managers are global by nature. And my background, just for references, I've been in the consulting industry for maybe 15 years or so, but also as well spent half of my life on the client side with the likes of M&G, GE Capital, Aberdeen Standard Investments, and the like. So, like to think I've seen life on both sides of the fence.
Well, that's excellent. That's actually important because you'll have a much better context as you're talking with folks who are still on the other side. So, your recent article, "Is Your Digital Data Working Hard Enough for You?" describes how wealth managers are developing their digital capabilities, but aren't necessarily doing that in a holistic way. I was hoping you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what we've seen over the years, and I guess particularly with the global pandemic, really putting a big focus on firms and how they're operating digitally with their clients and also internally. I think what we've seen is that it's been maybe built up over time. It's been a bit of pockets of activity in maybe areas like data, areas like the client experience, areas like their technology stack. But I think really we hadn't seen as much of that kind of holistic view as to what's my strategy for digital, how's that going to play out over the next couple of years, what kind of capabilities do I need, and what's kind of client experience I'm trying to create, and then translating that into a sort of a clear roadmap. So I think what we have seen now, though, is more of that starting to happen, and obviously I guess the pandemic has on one part accelerated things that maybe people were thinking about doing anyway. But it does mean that some things that are probably built up organically and in pockets now need to kind of be brought back together in a more kind of cohesive fashion. And we've seen that in all areas in terms of their firms' approaches to data, to automation, to using data and starting to make kind of good value and leverage that assets as strongly as possible. So yes, I think it's been built over time. Let's say we've certainly seen quite a sea change of that over the last 18 months or so as firms really start to sort of focus in on this area.
I would say that's probably not all that unique to just the industries you serve. I think everyone has sort of kind of woken up to that idea, but certainly now you, with this very specific focus now, can bring that concept back compared to them as well. So when firms are looking at their analytics from interactions with their prospects and customers, whatever, the article mentions that these firms are starting to look at their customer journey as they develop their solutions for lead management, et cetera. How can automation support this more personalized type of interaction?
Yeah, and then it's definitely what we've seen now. I think there's a couple of things on the go, which is one is, we're all waking up to the fact that there's a lot of data that the digital footprint of any client sort of kind of leaves, and that actually has a lot of value in it. But I guess the challenge is if you're doing that all very manually and it's all very, bespoke, and you're trying to spend a lot of, sort of FTE in resources to do that, it starts to be less beneficial, and then of course it costs you more than the benefit you get out of it. So actually what we're seeing now is folks wanting to say, okay, how can I automate the collection of that data? How can I automate some of the analysis and the kind of rules that we're running against that? And then how can I start to automate to a certain degree the outcomes of that? So how do I surface it into like a programmatic marketing program, or like a nurturing activity where, maybe there's not so much need for human intervention too early and you want to sort of nurture some clients? Or the other one is, where do you sort of proactively share that intelligence with client teams so that they can kind of follow up on some of those kind of higher quality sort of signals that are being generated from this data. But I think the main thing is that to do all that in a manual way is pretty labor intensive and oftentimes wouldn't even be timely. So we are seeing now firms say, okay, how do I automate the collection of that data? How do I automate the treatments, the analytics, and then the workflows that kind of fall off the back of it? So I think that's, seeing now that sort of now begin to move quite quickly. A number of firms have been testing and trialing in this area. We always sort of advocate that kind of test and learn type approach. But once you've kind of proven it, to pretty quickly and scale that out as quickly as possible. And that's the only way you need to, automate some of these activities just so that it's manageable and it can be done at scale. But yeah, definitely an area that we're seeing, sort of now feeding into a lot of plans across a lot of asset and wealth managers for sure.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So as these wealth managers and asset managers look to get started on their digital transformation journeys, have you identified any specific areas that tend to be good starting points for them?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously those, but I think about, some of those, how you break down some of those things. So one of the audiences that they start with. So oftentimes trying to start with where there is a scale. So, if you're a firm that's got both an institutional book and also more of an intermediated wholesale book of business on the asset management side, you would probably start more of that latter because the volumes are there. Tend to start with sort of piecing together some of the available data sets that are kind of already readily available. Tend to sort of start with some of the tooling that the firms have already got in place that can do some of this automation activity. So we're certainly seeing, some of these decisions about where do you start being driven around kind of the audience, the nature of the engagement, the kind of the tech that's already in place and the data that's already available. And then proving out the case. So we talk about proof of technology as well as proof of value, but, prove there's some value first. And then off the back of that, then you can, start to industrialize things. So it's only saying firms kind of decide what their starting point is from those kind of different elements, but with the view that once they've done that, then, and the proven that it can be beneficial, then that they roll it out as quickly as they can across geographies and other segments, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, then all those types of decisions go into the melting pot around what what those MVPs look like and how they're constructed.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in your article, there are 4 main areas that you mentioned that asset management firms need to transform to get the most out of their client engagements. The 4 areas being people, technology, data, and process governance. Can you briefly touch on these areas and give us your thoughts on where asset managers could look to engage their clients more deeply?
Yeah, definitely. It is it's like exactly every topic in the business is under that heading, isn't it? Really. So you do have to kind of break it down a bit. And again, this is where when we lean into these questions around what, as we refer to it, the operating model. The thing is to be mindful. You don't have to build everything at the start. Take that agile mindset, take that MVP approach and, build a slither out that allows you to prove and then, sort of build it out from there. But if you look at those kind of 4 areas, if I think about things like data, so obviously that's one of the biggest things that a lot of firms are already, working on at the moment. So, where is it stored, the repositories, the tooling that's used and, obviously how that data is governed. So we tend to start there with the available data sets, what tooling, how do we get access to that? And then we start to piece together those different data sets. And then with a view that you can kind of, become more sophisticated on that over time. On the technology side, I think there's often a discussion around the platforms, have we got the right automation tooling in place? Have we got the right kind of analytics tooling? Have we got the right, data infrastructure, et cetera? And this is where firms are looking at their suite of tools, their suite of vendors and seeing where the gaps are. So we tend to say, obviously make sure you've got a good integrated stack, but you don't have to have it all full integrated on day one, but basically start to make choices about your vendors and partners in those areas if you've got gaps and then start to stitch those. The thing that's come out very strongly on the people bit, the third of the 4th elements is around skill sets, accountabilities between sales and marketing teams, the roles that people are playing, the accountabilities they take on. So we're often sort of looking there around to how do you start to think about what's the organization required to support these types of activities and better use data, et cetera, with the view that we're trying to in some instances, look at the accountabilities that now reside with a marketing and digital team that, are really around managing the clients, which they certainly wouldn't have been, 3 or 4 kind of years ago. And then the final one is the process and governance piece. I think there's again, any kind of automation type approaches need to think about what process it is, how do you lean it before you automate it, how do you put in some governance around that so that, particularly these initiatives which are, hitting how you handle clients and things like that, they'll be properly governed and that the processes are nice and streamlined. So there's quite a lot in all of those brackets, but I think this idea of take a slither, start on some of it and then mature and become more sophisticated, in line with the way that the firm is getting some value from these activities is a way that stops that, a 2-year project that costs, XD millions, which may not have yet delivered any particular return. So certainly that's the approach we have again.
Well, you bring up a good point there in terms of bringing in Agile. You said they don't have to spend the extra millions up front before they get a return later on. But have you seen asset managers and wealth managers offer resistance to moving to this Agile way? What are the biggest struggles that they may be facing as they look at doing this kind of Agile implementation?
Yeah, and in fact, projects like these tend to be a great way of bringing those ways of working into the firm because, as you say, it's pretty mainstream outside of asset and wealth management. Retail banking kind of work in this way, sort of insurance companies, and certainly anything outside of into the consumer electronics or media definitely working that way. So these types of projects we do find they are a good way of actually bringing the thinking and methodologies in because it is a bit of a we have this phrase, think big, start small scale for us. So it allows you to do a bit of visioning as to what, the end game could look like. Start with some very targeted MVPs and, get your cross-functional teams working together and then sort of roll it out as quickly as possible and do that with a very kind of client mindset in the teams and, the idea of getting things into the hands of clients very quickly and users very quickly so you can start getting some value from it. So actually we do find that, even though we are seeing now kind of the adoption of Agile increasing a lot across asset and wealth managers, projects and initiatives like these tend to be good exemplars of how to do that. So, and we've certainly had some great success on recent projects where the firm has wanted to move it, the firm we're working with has wanted to move in that direction. And this has been a great way to bring it, to make it real, bring it to life. But always sort of thing is people do want to, this Agile sometimes can have that kind of negative context of no planning, kind of keep going until you get the right answer and all that. In reality, it's far from that. So it's quite good to have a real live, tangible initiative that can, show the best of what those ways of working give to a firm. But yeah, it's definitely a part of bringing these things in, I think, because of the avoidance of the black hole of projects that go too long and don't quite deliver what they expected.
So, as you've seen firms adopting these new ways of working and new ways of interacting with their clients, what have they told you about their experiences as they've gotten past the initial culture shock, if you will, of getting to work in a more agile way?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that it's like a journey we'd say that firms to go on. I think those who have been through it and those who've certainly seen it in maybe other, industries and then brought some of that thinking to the asset wealth space, definitely see, much tighter sort of connection between the people who are on the commercial side, the people who sometimes people refer to as the business, and then people on the technology side. So there's a much closer collaboration and a much more kind of sense of shared ownership rather than, it being quite separate. So we've seen, that be a very big outcome. And I think we've seen firms, be able to prioritize more succinctly and more specifically because they are developing things that they can see can have a kind of a good user and client value relatively quickly, and they're using methods to do that. And we're seeing firms, I guess the main thing is firms working on what we call the right thing rather than, just a project which has been given approval, it's got a scope and, a timeline, but that doesn't change and they deliver it come what may. We are seeing firms being able to be a lot more nimble and agile. So they suggest to be able to change what their priorities are. And then, if something isn't quite working to see that very early rather than at the end of the process. So I've seen quite a lot of, benefit of firms being able to make sure their resources are always being sort of directed at the right initiatives, and that those initiatives have a very clear customer and user value off the back of them. So quite a lot of good benefits, but it, as we know, it does take a bit of time to get there. And it takes a bit of leadership, and it takes a bit of faith, and it takes a bit of nurturing as well to be able to bring those types of ways of working to firms that have been organized and run in a certain way for many, many years.
Now, that's a good question, and you just brought it up in passing. I don't want it to slip by because I think the leadership component of this is critical. Have you had any struggles within these wealth management firms where you're seeing the leadership pushback, or are they embracing this concept, saying, we really need to move forward more quickly, and this is a better way for us to do this?
I don't think I've seen anyone sort of disagree with the concept of being more nimble, being more able to react better, being able to manage resources much more effectively, being able to develop things that are going to be, used and adopted either internally by teams or, you can't. It's hard to kind of argue against that logic. I think the thing that is the challenge is for people to change. It's behavior, it's ways of working, it's organizational change, etc. So we as humans don't always like change. So I think there's that, which is that's the bit that sometimes can be the thing, which is, sort of, as we all know, breaking a habit and doing something new. And we all, the pandemic has been a great example where we were forced to change our habits quite considerably and hasn't completely worked out for the worse. So there is a bit of that. How do you kind of break a habit? How do you try something new? And how do you do that with a view that, it's not going to, put at risk business, the relationship with clients, the technology, obviously lots of people come out, will have a different thing that'll have in their mind as they go through this. But I think that's probably the biggest thing, which is just being able to take that first step and for, certainly for individuals to feel that, it won't be a retrograde or that it'll be positive. And as I say, by and large, if these things are done well, then it does always turn out to be better for the firm, better for individuals, because the teams tend to be more satisfied, more empowered, et cetera, et cetera. So it tends to be a good outcome once you get on that road.
That's excellent. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. We really appreciate it. I know our audience is really going to appreciate the way you approach this too, because, being agile is not easy, as you mentioned, but it's an important step to allow you to have that better customer relationship. So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us today.
Yeah, Michael, thank you very much for that. Very much enjoyed the conversation with you. So, thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.